Let's dive into the thing. I'm going to try to have it from your perspective, and I'll certainly fill in gaps if need be. But
yeah, of course.
Can you try to the best of your ability to take us through what the preparation, the different phases of preparation, what we were focused on at different times? These two lists were massive, and so it was kind of a lot to try to get it together. So, like I said, from your perspective, I'll try to fill in the gaps to the best of my memory too.
Yeah, of course. So I just want to preface here that, I'm not an expert when it comes to taking auditions. This is just my experience with working with you and organizing myself. And I feel as we explain it, it may seem pretty intuitive and standard to what most people talk about who have been successful with their audition preparation. I think there's a lot of commonalities between different approaches. But the key aspect of this program that I think worked with me is the organization that comes with it. I think having a foundation that is very specific is what helps me gain consistency in my playing and preparation, and help me play at a much higher level than I think I was before, which for me is the hardest part to nail down. How do you play the way that you've been practicing? How do you play like the best you can and not let an audition change that? So as someone who personally can get overwhelmed by big projects like this organizational aspect really helped me. There's a very large visual representation of this for how to practice specifically, that pretty much went down to the day. And, as we worked together, the plan was subject to change. Unexpected things came up, but I think that foundation was really important. And using the spreadsheet the way we used the spreadsheet to organize, was really useful for me for this purpose, because it ended up taking a lot of stress out of my situation. All I really had to do was follow the plan that we created and not really worry about anything else. Just trust that this is the plan that we've set out, and see it through and see what happens. So yeah, this past month I took 2 auditions with the Milwaukee Symphony and North Carolina Symphony. They were within 2 weeks of each other, I believe, which meant in my particular situation, I had to treat the prep as one combined list. I couldn't really focus on one audition over the other because they were so close together. And they were for different positions in the orchestra, so there wasn't a lot of overlap. And I believe it was a cumulative list of almost 100 excerpts between the 2 auditions, a lot of which I'd never worked on before. Like that, to me, was an insane project that we were going to try and embark on. That's so much to work on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the way your program works is pretty much all your prep is broken up into 3 phases. Ideally, each phrase will last about 2 weeks, and you want the timeline to line up close or as close as you can to the day of your preliminary round. So with multiple auditions like I had, my plan needed to shift a little bit, but that's the general timeline that we followed.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the first phase, I'm going by your labels. The first phase is what we call the ingraining phase. This is all about ingraining the music.
No, that's the first one's the acclamation one, right?
Oh,
ingraining is the second one. It's totally fine. Yeah, the first one's the acclamation phase. These labels don't really matter. I almost don't feel like I want to use the labels anymore. Like that's what I called them when I first started, but really I almost just like calling it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You know what I mean? Like, because you can call it whatever you want, and that was back when I was like working through it from like a fitness point of view, and I was like literally stealing everything from. But as I've kind of worked with it and gotten used to it, like those labels can be helpful for remembering it, but really it's just phase 1. We're just working on the unfamiliar and most technical things and like pulling all that out so that because you said a lot of this was unfamiliar, so it would be helpful to like really be able to focus on just that. So don't worry about that.
So phase 1, acclamation, not ingraining.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, it's pretty much everything you're unfamiliar or uncomfortable with. This includes all of your worst excerpts. And let me just say, before you start physically practicing, you want to figure out, how does every excerpt sound? How do you want it to sound away from the trumpet? So you're going to do a majority of your listening. You're going to compile all your favorite recordings. Sit down at a piano, make sure you can sing all the pitches correctly, study a score a lot, study a score to learn who you're playing with, how does your part fit into the general landscape of the piece. And you also want to pick your personal tempo goals for each excerpt. So that's going to be some sort of middle ground based on the recordings that you listen to. There might be a recording that is pretty far-fetched. You wouldn't really consider that as a standard tempo for a particular excerpt. So this all really needs to happen before you start physically practicing. And it can take a lot of time, but it's really crucial to set up the rest of the prep. But yeah, so you might be better at explaining this part, but next you pretty much take your most unfamiliar excerpts and you start practicing them at a very slow tempo so that you can work your way up slowly to the tempo goals. So with so many excerpts, we use the Excel sheet to track how many times a week was I practicing each excerpt, what was the progress I was making, and if I had any notes on what I wanted to improve. So we made a schedule, distributed the list as evenly as possible throughout the week so that no one day was really more overwhelming than the other. We wanted to kind of break up the work so it was even throughout the week. Yeah. And make it realistic with actual practice. You plan in your rest days and all that stuff. So for example, for a technical excerpt. Oh,
I was gonna interject real quick. It is worth saying too that because the North Carolina audition, you already said they were 2 weeks apart. So we basically, it's like we did 2 separate preparations, 2 weeks apart from each other. So as Micah is describing this process, it's just to keep in mind that North Carolina had 2 weeks. And then when we started the next phase of North Carolina, we began the first phase of Milwaukee as well. So it's just, that's just worth keeping in mind that it was all 2 weeks apart from each other. So when it got stacked on top of each other, it just, it became a lot. But anyway, you were saying, for example,
it was a lot of playing, I will say. But I don't back down from a challenge, I guess. So what was I saying? Oh yeah.
You were saying okay.
For example, if you have a technical excerpt, you need to work on it a lot. This is just to help picture how the spreadsheet was set up. You might decide maybe you're going to practice that excerpt 3 times a week. And each time you practice it, you'll do 3 repetitions of that excerpt. So I'd probably start practicing a super technical excerpt. Maybe this is just arbitrary numbers, really. You can make it more personal to your needs, but maybe I'll play it 50% of my goal tempo and increase the tempo by 4% for each repetition. The tempo increases, you want to keep that small because you want to keep the progress intentionally slow and manageable to not overwhelm yourself. This is a big project over a long period of time. You don't need to be in a rush to do anything. So this Excel sheet that we use really was key for organizing and helping me visualize real progress that I was making. The other thing I'll say is recording yourself is probably the most important part of any audition that you take. Every single repetition that I did was recorded. I immediately listened back to it. And after listening back, I'd take notes. What did I do well? What do I want to work on? Don't let emotions really be a part of it. You want to be as objective and specific as you can be. And then I would maybe pick 1 or 2 of those things to try and fix for the next repetition. And you repeat the process as many times as you've written in your Excel. So if a problem was fixed, I would go back into my sheet. I would write down what did I do to fix it. And for every excerpt over a period of time, I kind of made a log of the things that I figured out. I think this is really important because it helped me kind of continuously build progress with each repetition by having a reference that I can go back to. And it also minimized wasted time or extra playing because, like we were saying, this was a really big project with a lot of practicing on top of, school or whatever professional requirements that I had. So for me, this was the most efficient setup that we could create. So yeah, that's phase one. Once you have all your excerpts pretty much up to the tempo that you've set yourself for yourself, and you feel like you can play it pretty accurately, you move to phase two. I'd say this is probably going to be the bulk of your prep. If you have more time, you might spend more time there, but that's entirely up to you. But at this point, you ideally know how to play every excerpt on the list, and you're at least capable of playing it the way you want at the tempo you want. So the big thing about this phase is you're now shifting from practicing to performing. I'd say you can prioritize what needs more practice and schedule that accordingly, but generally each excerpt would have about 2 repetitions. So for the first one, again, you're recording yourself with a metronome at your goal tempo, and you want to practice playing things right the first time. So you're performing for the first repetition, and it's okay if you crash and burn. That's part of the process, but you generally want to simulate the audition mindset where you only get one chance at playing well. Then I'd go back, I'd listen, analyze what I hear. And when I move on to the second repetition, now my focus is on maintaining and ingraining those good habits. So what we did is we'd bump the tempo back down to something slower and more manageable and play it through, again, recording yourself, making sure that you're building healthy habits and the confidence that comes with that. That's really important, because the next time, the idea is basically every time you go back to a particular excerpt, the gap between your first run and your second run diminishes, and you get better at trying to play an excerpt the way you want the first time. That's your goal. So once you've done that, then you move on and you kind of increase the difficulty level. Now, phase 3, you start running randomized mocks, and you're honing in on, your first round excerpts and perhaps even playing section round excerpts with other people. So for the randomized mocks, what we did is we took a random number generator. I messed around a little bit with how many excerpts I'd play for each round and how many rounds to do for each day. But I think what helped was trying to parallel the structure of the actual audition. So if you get an email from the audition coordinator and they say, okay, your audition time is going to be 2:00 for the preliminary round, maybe you want to try to time it around that, or maybe you try to simulate what that audition day will feel like. Or maybe there are going to be multiple rounds in a day, so you might try to simulate that feeling and make sure that that's all comfortable. But again, you're making sure you're still recording every round that you do. You listen back and analyze. And I think over time, the execution of rounds becomes more consistent. You kind of get a better sense of how to transition between musical styles, instruments or gear or whatever might be holding you back, because you're no longer just practicing one excerpt. You're practicing a list. One thing that I did a little differently from the program that I think also helped me a lot was, separate from the randomized mocks, was the excerpts that I felt would be called on a first round. Once I got to the point where I felt like my execution overall was pretty good and consistent, I practiced only starting those excerpts. So, and I'd pretty much make a little game out of it. I would put trumpets all around my house and, pick up a horn and see, okay, can I play the first opening triplets of Mahler 5? Okay, put the horn down. I'll walk around, pick up another horn. Okay, play the opening arpeggio of Petrushka, put that horn down, go around. Okay, can I play Carmen? I would do this a good amount. maybe at the end of my day. But I think overall, the big thing that this helped me was minimize really how much thinking and mental work that I was doing. I think, you're working on these lists, and some of the excerpts that you might not really focus on as much, that are quote unquote maybe more standard, are things that you've been working on probably since you started playing your instrument. Who knows what your history was, but for me, there's a lot of baggage that can be associated with excerpts like that, and there can be a lot of overthinking, and I mean, you never know. Like, it can be tough to sometimes execute those in a high pressure setting. So I think that was really helpful for me. I got to, make things simple, which is always better for me. I'm just focusing now on playing the first note with the healthiest, most beautiful sound, and it's really not more complicated than that. And I think that actually gave me a leg up in the actual audition, because there are common pitfalls with every excerpt, and you want to try to avoid those in general. The other thing that I think is really important for this phase is you need to consider what makes you confident as a musician. So for me personally, I feel most confident when my chops are rested and supple. So if I'm grinding excerpts over a long period of time on repeat, sometimes that might give me the tendency to wear out a little bit. So in those last few weeks, I'll maybe spend some of my time playing music I enjoy, or reminding myself that trumpet really is a fun thing that we do. I think that's really important to stay positive, especially when we're in such a competitive field.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, if you're playing in an audition, a committee can hear it in your playing when you're having fun. If you're stressed out, if you're having fun, all your emotions, they come out in your playing, whether you like it or not. I think it's just overall better to have fun when we're doing this. It doesn't always have to be such a stressful, intense, scary thing that we do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so
I remember when I was doing the Gregson, I got into that last phase, and it kind of felt exactly the same. I was like just playing, and I was trying to remember, like, I've put all of this work into it, and I've been down in like the depths of like trying to make every small little detail better. It was nice to just like lighten up a bit and just play and have fun, and sort of in some ways enjoy like the work that I had put into it, the sort of quality of playing I was able to experience as a result. So it's kind of interesting you sort of, because I don't think we talked about that. Maybe we did, but I don't remember talking. We didn't. So that's kind of cool. You came to a very similar conclusion.
Well, yeah, I noticed, like pretty much with every audition, the closer I get, the more stressed out I would be. And that's just not a good feeling. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's ever helped my playing either. So, maybe what happened is I just made the decision to not be stressed out anymore. Maybe I just changed my mindset. But I think it's really important to not let yourself kind of get bogged down in your insecurities or in the things that you don't really feel comfortable with, because that's not really why we do this.
Yeah.